What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode is brought to you by StatHero, reshaping the way you play fantasy sports. Dozens of house-based games with no sharks, no funky props, just your skill versus the lineups you choose. StatHero.com/lockedon. As always, I want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. If you cannot already tell, the Wi-Fi issues have continued. We are once again recording from a remote setting, so I apologize for any of the poor video or audio quality. I had someone come take a look at it, said it was fixed. Obviously, that is not the case. So it has been a rough weekend, to say the least. The only thing that has made this weekend better has been the Louisville women's basketball team clinching their Elite Eight berth. We will recap the Sweet 16 victory over Tennessee, 76-64. We'll also, preview the upcoming matchup against Michigan that is scheduled for tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern time. And then in the final segment, we will conduct the weekly mailbag. So we'll start out talking about the Tennessee matchup, 76-64 in the Sweet 16 in Wichita, Kansas on Saturday against the Tennessee Volunteers. It was a matchup for the Cardinals to where, I think that they just continually showed, their heart on both ends of the court, their passion. It really wasn't a point in the game where I was like, okay, where is our focus at in this one? It seemed like the team was, zoned in all game long. We mentioned on the Friday edition of the show when we previewed the matchup against Tennessee, we talked about, okay, we need to eliminate the long scoring droughts that this Cardinal team sometimes struggles with. And for the most part, I don't think that there was a very long, extended amount of time in which the team struggled with the drought. So I thought that, got a good amount of good looks, despite Hailey Van Lith and Kianna Smith shooting a combined 12 for 36 from the field. Now, granted, that's 33%, but, Hailey, 7 for 21, Kianna, 5 for 15. So overall, not the most efficient. They got some good looks. I like the fact that they were, moving well without the ball. They created some good looks on offense. And for the most part, those two players had some struggles with, making some shots, but ultimately they stepped up when it was needed the most. I think that really there wasn't one true star in this one. We talked about Hailey, talked about Kianna. Emily Engstler by far had the most efficient night, 20 points, 7 for 12 from the field, 10 rebounds. You had Payton Verhulst come off the bench for 7 points. Olivia Cochran needs to get a shout out here. Only had, I think it was 3 points, but when you talk to Jeff Walz after the game in his post-game press conference, he said she may, obviously paraphrasing a little bit, she may not have had the biggest night, the best night, whatever you want to call it, on the box score. But he was like, make no mistake about it, if we don't have Olivia Cochran, we don't win this game. And that's exactly the vibe that I came away with as well. She was in the press conference, I think it was sometime later on, maybe it was yesterday. You could definitely tell, like, under her eye, there was, some swelling where she had gotten elbowed in the eye, and the foul was called on her somehow. But ultimately, you saw how much she battled. Really made life tough for Tamari Key, who I think was like 1 for 5 from the field. Ray Burrell led the Lady Vols in this one, 22.6 rebounds. Jordan Walker and Alexis Dye had a combined 19 points. The Lady Vols shot 24% from three-point land, 36% from the field, versus the Cardinals shooting 42% from the field, 33% from three-point land. Just 2 more made three-pointers on the same amount of attempts. If you would have told me that the Cardinals would have got out-rebounded 52-36 in this one, well, I would have said there was some question as to whether or not Louisville would win this game, but it kind of evened itself out when I looked at the fact that the Cardinals won the turnover margin 18-7. So I think that that's the key thing to focus on here is, yes, Tennessee did what Tennessee's been doing all year long, and that's rebounding the ball very, very well. And they do that at a high rate. They crash the offensive glass extremely well, very efficiently. But Louisville in their own respective way, put a mark on this game, 18-7. The flow of the game, Louisville jumped out early on in this one. They got it by double digits at various points in the first half. Tennessee clawed their way back to make it a single, or not a single possession, a single digit deficit going into halftime. They opened up the third quarter with a little bit of momentum, and it kind of went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then the fourth quarter came, and that's when Tennessee had a couple buckets, but Kianna Smith, Emily Engstler, Hailey Van Lith coming up big for the Cards down the stretch. And for a team that does not have a number one scorer or a true number one scorer, just kind of based upon what we've seen this year, I guess you could really kind of say Hailey Van Lith has turned into that number one scorer. But when I mean number one scorer, I mean like a Dana, like a who the primary scoring option is. And although Hailey might be that now, she hadn't necessarily been that early on in the season, but maybe that's changed as of late. I think that the big three, as I call it, Hailey, Emily, and Kianna have really embraced kind of sharing that scoring responsibility. And that is music to Louisville fans' ears, because I feel like in the years, which haven't really been a lot, because when you think, go back to the past 10 years, you've had Shoney, you've had Asia Durr, you've had Dana Evans for, a good amount of, that time frame in the past decade. So there really hasn't been a handful of years in which Louisville hasn't necessarily possessed a true number one scorer. They have now. It seems like having a trio of players who can replicate that production, I think it's big for Louisville, and I'm very, very impressed with the way that Hailey Van Lith has continued to play. She scored 20 points in all of the games, I think in all 3 games so far. Hailey Van Lith has scored over 20 points. Emily Engstler continuing to get it done on the offensive side of the ball, 20 points. Also, 10 rebounds to lead the Cards. Kianna Smith didn't necessarily play all that well, but she still, contributed 12 points. Chelsie Hall had a very solid game, hit a couple big shots. Payton Verhulst, the confidence is getting there. It's growing more and more. So, ultimately, I'm not going to sit here and nitpick this performance too much, because at the end of the day, you beat a top 4 seed in your region by double digits. And it just so happens that top 4 seed is one of the most, historical storied programs in women's basketball history in Tennessee. And it's a very solid team. Obviously, no Jordan Horston, which I thought she might be able to play in this matchup. So please forgive me for including her in the player to watch in last week's episode. But ultimately, I think that Louisville handled business. It's all about surviving and advancing. And, what can you say other than that you're relieved that the Cards are in the Elite Eight once again? And obviously, the hope is that they will get to the next stage in the Final Four. But they have to go through the 3rd-seeded Michigan Wolverines to do so. This is a team that Louisville has defeated pretty handily early on in the season. We're still going to talk about why you cannot overlook the Wolverines in this Elite Eight matchup. We'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, StatHero. Look, StatHero has been a huge help for me, especially in this time of the year. I feel like, March Madness is my favorite time. I love to fill out my bracket or brackets, depending on, where I'm filling them out through work office pools, the tournament challenge app. But it seems like the first day my bracket is automatically decimated. Like it's just completely, shot down. That's where I think StatHero has really kind of helped me this year. It takes a little bit of a different approach. It's what daily fantasy was made to be. It pits the star players and a set of players that you can choose against another set of players. Winners win up to 4 times more because it's you versus the projected set. So, you can really, choose the college players, and put them in a set and, hope to come out on top. It is very, very simple. So do yourself a favor before March Madness ends. Go to stathero.com. You can sign up for free today at stathero.com/lockedon. And if you use the promo code Locked On, you will get a 100% deposit match. Once again, that's StatHero.com/Locked On for a 100% deposit match. As always, I want to take this time to personally thank you all again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Look, as I mentioned, I'm extremely sorry for this Wi-Fi, the poor Wi-Fi quality. If there is a lag or, bad video quality, audio quality, I sincerely do apologize. I believe that it's something that I hope that it gets fixed here in the near future. But I really can't speak to that certainly because I already thought it would have been done. But I digress. Enough about me. More about the women's basketball team. This Louisville women's basketball team on a roll, like Louisville fans thought they would be. The only team standing between them and a Final Four berth is a familiar opponent, the Michigan Wolverines. The Cardinals defeated back in early December in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, 70-48 at the KFC Yum Center. I do caution those that believe this is going to be an easy game to not think that way. I'm not saying that the players and the coaching staff is thinking this way because they're not. Jeff Walz is one of the best coaches in getting his team kind of refocused after a loss. So that when his team has beaten another team, he's definitely not taking that team lightly. So I caution the Louisville fans to believe that this is going to be an easy game because of the previous results. We've seen throughout college basketball history, both men's and women's, that even though a team might have defeated another team very soundly, maybe once or twice throughout the season, that might not necessarily matter come March, come the end of tournament time. But it is a good parameter and measure into how success can be replicated. In that first matchup, it was all about the Cardinal defense. They caused 24 turnovers against Michigan. It was a team, the Lady Wolverines shot 13% from three-point land, made 2 attempts. Naz Hillmon was held to 12 points, 8 rebounds. The Cardinals, went on record after that game and really, for the preview of this game, and they said they really played aggressive when it came to defending Hillmon, who's one of the best players in the Big Ten. The post player currently averages 21 points per game, 10 rebounds, shooting the ball just under 58% from the field. One of the more dynamic post players in college basketball. She had 17 points in the Wolverines' victory in the Sweet 16 over the South Dakota Coyotes. This was a game plan that Louisville executed very well. They used their aggressiveness and tenacity on defense to really fluster the Wolverines, especially in the post. In the first time around, not only was it aggressive in the post, but also the help defense was huge in that regard as well. So in the pregame pressers, the Louisville players basically kind of summarizing, we're like, we want to try to do what we did in that first matchup. And I think that that's kind of where the keys to the game come for this matchup as well. In the first one being, you have to make life tough once again for Naz Hillmon. Hillmon has shown that when you let her take over a game, she will do so. There is no hesitation. She's able to really get in the post and really go to work. Is very, very solid with her footwork, and she's pretty quick on her feet for a player of her size, and she's very, very tall and just has a huge build for a defender to go against in the paint. I believe she's like, I want to say 6'3" or 6'4", but regardless, very, very solid. Despite a lot of teams just singling out and trying to double team her in the paint, she's able to handle that as well and pass out of it. Layla. I think it's Felia. I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. And Maddie Nolan both average under 9 points a game. Those are some other players that Louisville needs to focus on. But Hillmon is the player to focus on for the Wolverines. And, if they can make life tough for her, then they can make life tough for the Wolverines in general. As I mentioned, for Louisville player to watch for here, I think that this is a an interesting one. I'm going to go Emily Engstler. We went Hailey Van Lith the past couple times. I'm going to go Emily Engstler because in that game, in the first time around, she had 18 points, 14 rebounds, 5 steals. I mean, she was incredible. I was actually at that game with my dad, and I remember saying to myself, if she's playing like this, there's no telling what this Louisville team can do. So it's just a matter of if she can replicate that tenacity and that toughness that made life tough for not only Hillmon but other players around the perimeter. That defense leading to good offense. That's another aspect. I think that the keys to the game for Louisville we mentioned. Playing Hillmon in a way that it makes life tough for her in the paint and making it tough, kind of like how you've done for some of the top players that you've gone up against, Ryan Howard, Hillmon, so on and so forth. I think the second key to the game for the Cardinals is, continuing to force turnovers because, yes, you forced 24 the last time, but you also turned the ball over 19. So I think it's kind of a two-way street. You have to be efficient on offense and forcing turnovers on defense, limiting turnovers on offense. So winning the turnover battle is a big key aspect of this one because I think that the Cardinals are at their best when they are able to move in transition. You have a player in Emily Engstler with her size that moves very well for her 6'1", 6'2" frame. That's very solid. You have Kianna Smith, Hailey Van Lith, who can pull up in transition and shoot good shots, so on and so forth. So I think limiting Naz Hillmon's role on offense, or I guess you could say production on offense, and then winning the turnover battle are the two keys to the game here for the Cardinals. Prediction time, as I mentioned in the the opening monologue, statement. I do think that Louisville comes out on top in this one. I think that Louisville, it's not going to be a 22-point victory. I think that Louisville wins by about 8 to 9 points. I look for Hailey Van Lith to score 20 again. I think Emily Engstler is going to be very big in this game as well. Naz Hillmon is going to do better than she did the first time around. But at the end of the day, I think that this is probably a close game at the start, maybe through the first 3 quarters. I wouldn't be surprised to see it being like a single possession game going into the fourth quarter. And at that point, excuse me, I got the hiccups. I do think at that point in the fourth quarter that Louisville is going to be able to push it out of reach, 8, 9 point victory. I will say I have not been very good on my predictions. I was going to say that at the same time. I don't think that that's a word. But it seems like if I predicted a win, it's either not close margin-wise. Excuse me. It's either not close margin-wise or it is just completely wrong. So hopefully I am very close to being right. I do think it's going to be a victory. So we will obviously recap that game. Hopefully we're singing the songs of a clinching of the Final Four berth. So we'll talk about that matchup tomorrow, or that contest, I should say, tomorrow. But for the remainder of the show, I want to dive into the weekly mailbag segment while we can. We'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Built Bar. As the month of March ends, your resolutions that you made at the beginning of the turn of 2022 might be, kind of out the window. You might have kind of put them on the back burner and maybe not have touched them since. It's time to bring those back out, especially if yours is about eating healthy. Built Bar has kept me on my path to eating healthy because it's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. Sometimes, the protein bars are kind of, chalky, waxy, hard to choke down. Not Built Bar. It's covered in 100% real chocolate. It's low in calories, high in protein. If you go to Built.com and check out the macros chart, you'll be blown away by how much healthier it is than an actual candy bar while being pretty much tastier than a candy bar, in my opinion. They have a ton of different flavors. They try to make things tasty first, and then they find a way to make it healthy after. So do yourself a favor. Go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Once again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. For the final segment of the show, I want to dive into the weekly mailbag. I was wanting to hold it off for later on in the week, but with a possible Final Four berth on the line. Alan Thomas of T-Shirt Hooligan and StateOfLouisville.com being on the show. Jeremy Wallman being on the show. I figured I'd go ahead and start out the week with a mailbag because there are some questions that you all have asked, and I don't want to get to a situation to where I don't incorporate a mailbag into this week's episodes. But I'm going to go ahead and get it with this one. The first question is, do you think Louisville will seriously get involved with 2022 five-star Sky Clark's recruiting? Simple answer, yes. It was announced last week through a couple of media members that Louisville and Kenny Payne had reached out to Sky Clark. There's no secret that the former University of Kentucky commit / signee is close to some of the former assistants at Kentucky that are possibly in the running here at Louisville. Joel Justice, so on and so forth. I think that ultimately it kind of comes down to Illinois and Louisville. Tim Anderson, that the Illini assistant, is very close with Sky Clark, one of his main recruiters. And I do think that Kenny Payne will be able to make up ground in the Clark sweepstakes, in this one. So I'd say right now it's too close to tell. Those on the Illinois side of things are confident, and those media members in the Louisville side of things are confident. So obviously one of them is wrong. Hopefully for our sake that the Louisville side is right. I know Jeremy Wallman has kind of been hinting at it with his cryptic Sky tweets and stuff like that. Hopefully that comes to fruition. So, but to answer your question, yes, Louisville is going to be seriously involved in Sky Clark's recruitment. Continuing on in the basketball side of things, with Sam Williamson deciding to transfer and likely the Davis brothers are out as well, do you see any more roster turnover, and who are some other guys that could be on the move? This is always hard to predict. And we'll talk about Sam entering the transfer portal. Deontay Davis has decommitted. There hasn't been official word that Dre Davis has hit the transfer portal, but with the Davis brothers seemingly being a package deal, it seems like the writing is on the wall. I think that L. Ellis, Sidney Curry, J.J. Traynor, Jalen Withers are all staying. Obviously, I think Noah Locke is going to turn pro. Jared West and Mason Faulkner, Malik Williams don't have any more college eligibility. I would probably be surprised to see Matt Cross here again next season, I guess. I think Matt Cross would probably be a guy that looks to go elsewhere. Dre Davis. I think Mike James would likely stay as well. Roosevelt Wheeler is probably on the fence. It really just kind of depends, with the transfer portal and everything. It really just kind of depends. So, but I think Matt Cross and Dre Davis are probably the next two to maybe hit the portal if I had to guess. Like I said, that's no inside information coming from my side. And then the next question kind of goes back to recruiting. What avenue do you think Kenny Payne uses to address the low roster numbers for next season? I assume that is asking whether or not do I think most of the numbers are going to come from high school recruiting, transfer, so on and so forth. I think it's going to be a healthy mix. I think, there's going to be, a handful of transfers, maybe 1 to 2 2022 recruits. There could also be 1 to 2 2023 recruits that end up reclassifying. The good thing is with Kenny Payne, it seems like there's a lot of players all on certain levels that want to play for Kenny. So it's really just a matter of him being selective and filling out his roster in a way that he feels that this team can be the most successful next year. So that's kind of the story there. And then the final question, this kind of goes with it kind of relates to Sidney Curry. With Sidney Curry posting a lot of pro-Louisville stuff here recently and agreeing to do a basketball camp here in the city, does that foreshadow him possibly staying? It's actually really funny that that's a question because owner of T-Shirt Hooligan and StateOfLouisville.com writer Alan Thomas will be on the show for a special episode on tomorrow's episode. he for those who don't know, T-shirt Hooligan, I believe, is sponsoring that camp, so he will have all the information, inside info on that. I personally think that obviously can't hurt it. At the end of the day, who knows? But I do think I probably would expect Sydney to be one that stays. So, but that's all that I have for the mailbag today. We talked about the solid things that happened from the Louisville Tennessee Sweet 16 matchup. We recapped that. We previewed the Michigan game in the Elite Eight and why the Cardinals will come out victorious. We also conducted the weekly mailbag. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. Tomorrow's episode, like I said, a special episode. We will have Alan Thomas on. There will be another episode that talks about the whatever happens in the women's basketball game, and Sam Williamson and Deontay Davis no longer going to be with the program. So be sure to check out that. I want to give a shout out to the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast that has been doing record numbers. You can check that out, those live shows at cardinalsportszone.com. But that's going to wrap up this Monday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we will see you right back here